Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Heléne Smuts, the founder of Credo Growth. Credo Growth is a growth consultancy that empowers entrepreneurs and business leaders to grow their technology companies. In the episode, we discuss how she founded Credo Growth and the challenges she faced to get here. We also discuss other projects she's working on, like Bootcamp to Boardroom and Junior to Giants. We also discuss her book, Ditch Mediocrity, Learn How to Take Your Team Performance from Average to Incredible. And we break down some of the concepts within the book, like transactional analysis and many more. We cover a wide range of topics. I think this is a really interesting conversation. I enjoyed it. I hope you do too. Enjoy the show. Hi, Heléne. Thank you for joining me today. I feel like you're working on so many different projects, and so there are so many directions we can head in today. But to get started, could you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course, and naturally, thanks for having me. It's great to have a conversation with you. Sure, who am I? I'm from Pretoria. I was born and raised in Pretoria, and I moved to Cape Town the day after my 21st birthday. And I've now lived longer in Cape Town than I have in Pretoria. I come from a minister's household, so that has shaped quite a bit who I am today and how I operate things. But I think in terms of just fundamentally who I am as a person is, my team will say there's a lot of passion, and sometimes that comes through in my personality in terms of demanding and high expectations. But I also have quite an emotional side when something's really beautiful. That gets to me quite in an emotional way, and then of course I've got a phenomenal husband. I've got little twin 8-year-old girls who is 8 going on 16. That challenges me. And then of course I'm also a business owner, and just trying to make sure that we can support our clients.
And so that's fantastic. Thank you for the context. And you mentioned you're a business owner and you founded and run a company called Credo Growth. What does Credo do?
So Credo Growth is what we call a growth consultancy. And because of our obsession with growth and high performance, we focus on people growth, and we do that through people development, leadership development, coaching, personality profiling, team developments where teams are in conflict. Then we also focus on strategic thinking and execution planning, where we really facilitate and walk a journey with our clients to help them define their strategy and their execution plan. Sometimes you're good at strategy, but not at execution, and the other way around. And then finally, we also support in terms of sales consulting and sales training. So we've got experts in these 3 different fields that really support the clients ultimately to grow. Grow business, grow people, grow sales. So that's in a nutshell what Credo Growth does.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. And what inspired you to start a company like Credo Growth?
Interesting question. I didn't grow up as an entrepreneur at all. So it's actually quite a few things that happened. I initially, I think it was 2007 or something, I really wanted to go into coaching and people development and employee wellness, because that I finished my degrees and all of those things. And the company that I worked at, Go to Africa, they're a phenomenal company. I cried my eyes out the day I left. It wasn't really the right space for them to have a complete employee wellness department, if I can call it that. So that is what drove me to open my first business, which was a coaching practice. And then after that, I started with another business and co-founded another people consultancy, and I was there for 11 years. And then I kind of exited that business as well to open Credo Growth. And it's interesting because my husband was like, are you going to go back into the workforce, or are you going to continue and start another business? And the idea of that freedom of being able to do what you want, how you want it. I'm not talking about it in a mean-spirited way, but that freedom to take the half day and go and spend time with my kids. I could not let that go. So therefore, I also decided to open the third business, which is named Credo Growth, so that I can still do what I do really well, because I believe I'm really good at it. And we've created an amazing business that supports clients, and that I still have the freedom of what it is to be an entrepreneur. I don't know if that answers your question.
It definitely does. And it seems like you were drawn in by coaching quite early on. I feel like some people sort of develop skills in a particular area and then decide maybe I should become a coach. What drew you to coaching?
So I grew up in a minister's household, like I said, and my dad, I mean, he did all of his pastoring sessions, and he was really a supportive coach and mentor to people in his church. And I think I saw that growing up, and I saw how appreciative people were. And I've heard how people speak about the transformation. By no means did I wanted to go into the ministry field, but to this day, I still think I got it from what I've seen my dad do, and just kind of the lessons that he instilled in me in terms of how to listen to people and how to be with people. So in the beginning, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I studied tourism management and I finished my degree. And it's interesting, even through going into travel and tourism, I still managed to find my way back to this type of people development coaching, and helping people get better. That includes myself, of course. So yeah, it was an interesting journey, but I'm very happy that I went there. And then from coaching, it morphed into group coaching and then into team developments and working with teams and companies and cultures. So yeah, it was a very interesting journey. And the great thing is that we now also have a business called Credo Travel, which is going back to my previous passion, and my previous experience, and do what Credo Growth does purely for the travel industry, because it is so different. So yeah, that's kind of the interesting journey that I've walked.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And you mentioned that you caught the entrepreneurship bug and you just couldn't go back. But did you have any fears starting your own business?
I still do. Yeah, I think I was never very good at math nor accounting. I won't say how many times I had to rewrite accounting in varsity. But I think my fear was the lack of business knowledge and understanding. And also, I remember, in fact, we had this discussion yesterday in a workshop that I've facilitated. I felt guilty charging for things. I felt guilty asking for people money in trade for services, and that's no way to start a business. And I still have that sometimes. And then obviously, as you go in entrepreneurship, you learn, you develop, you kind of gain certain skills. And now the fears become other things, like what if I don't deliver on my clients what my client really wants? What if the business all of a sudden fails? Because then there's a whole loads of other repercussions around the team that I have and what is going to happen with them, what's going to happen with my family. So it went from skills, the nerves of not knowing how to run a business and what to do. I think the fear is now what's going to happen if it doesn't work on the people that have been impacted. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, I know everyone has fears, and it's so interesting how fears sort of evolve. And even though we've proven that we can do certain things, we still are fearful of other things. They always just appear in different forms. And you mentioned feeling guilty for charging. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people, it's that imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and it's like, why would someone pay for my services? And how did you initially get over that hurdle?
There's no other way to say. I just had to do it, and sit with that extremely extreme uncomfortableness. So like push through the discomfort, I guess, is what I had to do. And what was interesting is, as I heard people giving me feedback around the transformation that they're going through and how much I've helped them, that has built my confidence to then go, okay, it's all right to charge. And then eventually, when you engage with what I have seen as the people that I've put on pedestals, and I gave them a freebie or I helped them out, and the feedback afterwards is, you should charge triple than what you're asking at the moment. That external validation gave me internal validation to be able to start really charging my worth and my value. And it's interesting, my business partner and I, we still have conversations of, do we do this? Do we help out here? And there's still areas where we really go and we help out. I mean, there's a very cool kind of truck shop here in Noordhoek that we're helping out. And so we're not losing that ability to support where we think support's really needed. But we certainly own our worth, I think.
That's great. So it's sort of a discovery process. You start lower because you're conflicted with feeling guilty. And then when people confirm that your services are good, you work your price up until you meet that sort of market value.
And the interesting thing is, if you ask me what is the one message that I always remember from my dad or from growing up, it is help people, make sure that you look after people, make sure that people can be proud of you. So it was always the please people factor. So you can imagine if that is ingrained in you, to then go against that it's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm sure. And what kind of problems do businesses and founders approach you with?
It's quite a broad spectrum, if I can call it that. But I think especially the past few years is things like, I've got team members in conflict with one another and they're impacting the rest of the business or the rest of the team. Teams operating in silos. You can imagine the beautiful thing that a hybrid and remote work is also creates a lot of disconnect. So people are starting to work on their own, and there's the lack of communication, which then leads to the lack of trust. So now all of a sudden, people don't speak to one another anymore. They don't bring ideas to the table. And then, especially in the smaller businesses and kind of tech businesses, we've got so many productivity processes that we put out, and now we're struggling to bring it all together and for everyone to work together on it. And yeah, then we've got a strategy, but we're really shitty at execution, or we all committed, but for some reason we don't move forward. And that's again then where the sales and the execution part comes in. So and then of course it's culture work, and the fact that they have a young leadership team as an example, and the leaders don't know how to lead well because they became leaders from specialist roles. So as you can hear, there's so many different things. So we really listen to what the client is going through, and there's different solutions for these different things that are happening.
I can imagine that makes your job really interesting. I mean, it's a case-to-case basis. There's diversity, and so it keeps things fresh. I can imagine.
It's not boring, I can tell you that. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, this morning I had a phone call of two people having a go at one another in a team, and I'm like, okay, this is a conflict challenge. Let's go for that. And then the other one is a team again that is doing really well, but they want to just up their level. So there's always a different challenge that needs to be addressed, and it's different personalities and different walks of life. I mean, we work with companies around the world, so that also brings in the different cultures. And I love that. It's just to be that curious and to see how people show up differently. You can see it excites me. So
yeah, definitely. And in terms of the goals that these companies want to achieve when they approach you, is it more on like the revenue scaling side of things, or is it like internal conflict type of things where they just want to sort out the internal processes so they can be better, basically?
So it's actually quite clear, because if someone approaches us from a sales consulting and sales training perspective, it's revenue. They want to increase their sales because sales solves a lot of problems. So that's quite revenue driven. Then if it is about the goals and execution and the kind of, we're not really sure we aligned, then it's very much the need for strategic collaboration between the teams. And when it is around the people side, it is absolutely clear that it's, for example, teams that are not operating well together. There's lack of communication, the silo mentality. There's even little cliques inside of a team, and that's causing some drama. So it's almost like each leg of the growth part of Credo feeds into the different reasons why people want us. But it's revenue-based, it's alignment, and then it's connectivity and connection between people, engagement, if I can call it that. Yeah.
And do you have a favorite type of problem? Is there one problem that like you're like, oh, I can solve this at a heartbeat. I love this kind of problem.
Yeah, so there's obviously the favorite problems for the different facilitators that we have, because they each have their phenomenal skills. My personal favorite one, and everyone always laughs, but is a team in conflict. I love getting to the bottom of conflict. I also am a straight shooter, so I hold the room, but I get to it because it's when you see the transformation once people have worked through that conflict, it is so cool to see. It's hard work, and you need to keep your wits about yourself. But that is my personal favorite, is when I have to go and do team developments where teams are really struggling to get along and work well together. That's where that's my favorite. Yeah, hands down.
That does sound very interesting. And I can imagine there's a lot of ego involved, particularly with the people that have brought you on board. They feel like they aren't the problem. And so it must be really difficult for them to hear that they may be causing a lot of the conflict internally.
Again, it's very situation specific, because sometimes the person that brings you on board, they have dropped their ego to say, I can't do this on my own. And in the session, it's extremely difficult, but they've already gone to the part where it's like, I need help. And then other times, we did a session a few weeks ago where in the session, it became apparent that the leader was kind of made aware of how the team felt about her. But at the same time, she also all of a sudden like let out how she's feeling, and the team never understood her. And for some reason, now, obviously, if I say for some reason, it works when there's a facilitator, but I know why it works because I'm not attached to any of these emotions. The facilitator is there to hold the room. So it is really empowering to see, for me, it's amazing to see how the people are feeling empowered to speak up and actually have these very tough conversations that they normally won't have in the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, I can see that being extremely valuable. And you're also a board member of the Entrepreneurs Organization. What value do you get from being a part of an organization like that?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of the Accelerator program for Entrepreneurs Organization, which is really supporting businesses to scale their businesses fast. I love it. I mean, it's part of the entrepreneurial journey that I can impact. I have been challenged to my core, being surrounded by entrepreneurs that have built many businesses, that have failed and got up and built bigger businesses, that have built sustainable businesses. So first of all, there's this community that you get of people that understand exactly what you're going through because they've done it. There's also people that are busy going through it together with you. So there's that support network. And then, like I said, I've been challenged to my core where people take an interest in your growth and they challenge you and they ask you really tough questions. And there's no place for ego then because you need to take, unless you feel that you know everything, which doesn't really happen. So for me, it was a community. It's deep-rooted friendships because of a common understanding of what the other person is going through. And selfishly, I use it as my growth platform in terms of people challenging me in my personal growth. So I've been part of that network for many years now, and yeah, I call it the cult because I don't get enough of it. But yeah, it's fascinating to not feel so lonely because you know the cliche, entrepreneurship is a lonely journey, and that has taken that loneliness out of it.
Yeah, I can imagine that being so helpful and useful to be able to share problems that other people can relate to pretty quickly. I mean, in broader social circles, if you're speaking to a family member that maybe just works a normal 9 to 5 or something like that, it's a bit harder for them to instantly understand the problems you're going through And so just having that community where it's not about explaining your issues, it's just about, this is my problem. And they're like, well, I've been through this before. This is how I approached it.
Yeah. And that's the other big thing about EO and EOA is it's not about giving someone advice. It's just to say, hey, I've experienced that, and this is how I dealt with it, exactly as you said now. So I'm generous with my experience and my learnings from my lessons. So it's not you should do this and you have to do this. It's really like, hey, this is what I have to offer, and see what from that you want to take and learn from.
That's amazing. And how do people use EO to their advantage? Is it like there are set talks regularly, or people join and it's a network and you reach out to people with similar problems to yours? How does that all work?
It's actually a fascinating program. Both if you think about EO and the Accelerator program, it's you are part of what we call a forum or an accountability group, and you stay with that forum in EOA, which is the Accelerator program. You stay with that forum for a year, and you meet once a month for 4 hours. Now, most people go, I cannot be out of my business for 4 hours. That's exactly why you need to join a program like this, because it teaches you, it's like a mini MBA. It teaches you how to put things in place so that you can step away from your business and have that objective looking at, the saying, work on your business, not in your business, that vibe. So first of all, you have access to your own forum, and you guys get to know one another really well. Then there are different learning events there, and it's learning events based on growing your business. Then there are learning events in terms of growing in a deeper personal way. And then there are other masterclasses and keynote talks that we set up that can cover an array of topics. So there's a lot of learning experiences. But for me personally, was that accountability group and your forum that you have, that you meet on, for every month for 4 hours, you are going to step away and speak about your challenges and hear from other people's challenges. And it's just 4 hours of business learning. I mean, what a gift. So
yes, that is a gift. Wow.
Yeah. And the Accelerator program also follows the methodology of the Scale Up book by Vern Harnish, which focuses on strategy, cash, people, and execution. So you follow almost that as a curriculum throughout the process of the program.
That sounds extremely valuable. Wow. And not only are you working with current entrepreneurs at every stage of their business, but you're also working with aspiring entrepreneurs. Could you tell me a bit about your project working with township entrepreneurs and the Junior to Giants program too?
So the Junior to Giants program is a program that was launched by the Generation Schools. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that, but it's a Montessori-based school, and then they also follow the Cambridge curriculum here in Cape Town, and I think they might have 1 or 2 schools, and one, not sure where else they are at the moment. But it's what they do is they take some of their top students in high school who have identified that they want to go on the entrepreneurial path, and they go through our entrepreneurial development journey. And these kids are 15, 16, 17 years old. So they go through their schooling, but they're also adding this entrepreneurial leg to it. And there I give some, whether you want to call it work readiness, professionalism skills, life skills, there's so many different terms for it. So we work a lot with that. And then also what we sometimes do is we connect them with mentors in the Accelerator program of Entrepreneurs Organization. So we look at the cohort and kind of like, okay, look, what is needed with this? But just the ability to give back to school students, for me is incredible, because you are busy shaping their minds in terms of what is possible. Whether they start their own business or whether they go and work for someone, it doesn't really matter, because it's about how they think and how they build that tenacity and grit in order to do whatever they do in a good and successful and performing way. So that's super cool. And also my kids go to the Generation School here in Komiki, which obviously just makes it feel a little bit more close to home to contribute to that. And then there's another program that we are involved in called Bootcamp to Boardroom, which I actually just spent 2 days with them. And this is more entrepreneurs that have already started a business or just started a business. So some of them have been 5 months in the making, and others have been in business for a few years, but they have never had access to business skills, financials, all of those things. They want to make a contribution. And I'm talking from a nail salon all the way to international freight, freighting, global freighting. And that's awesome to see that. And the last 2 days I'm getting goosebumps just to see how they are like a sponge and soaking up the information. And that goes from what I did as purpose and leadership through to branding, finances, how to put a pitch together for investors, how to put a pitch together for clients. It's so needed in this country that there's more knowledge going out to people who want to start their businesses. I just absolutely love being involved in it. It ticks my boxes.
I wish there was some form of entrepreneurship curriculum.
Yeah.
When I was at school, I feel like it's such an important skill to have, and it also creates another option that is almost not considered. People almost don't realize that option is available, and you can actually start your own thing. If you're hungry enough and you have an idea, give it a go, because all the lessons you'll learn and all the failures will be so important. And even if it doesn't work out, you've learned so much about yourself and about business. I've moved on to that later on in my life, and I just wish it happened sooner. I just wish it was presented to me sooner.
I don't know how you experienced it, but I certainly felt when I was at school and even university and even growing up in my parents' house, I was taught how to be a good follower, which is great. I mean, we've got something that's called the art of followership that we do for team members and things like that, because it's so crucial. But it's all I was taught. I wasn't taught how to be a good follower and how to look at things from a creative way, and that I can maybe run something. So I 100% agree with you. Hence why I think this Junior to Giants program that is already embedded in the schooling system, I wish all schools would do it.
Quick interruption from me. The podcast is starting to gain traction, which is amazing. And thank you so much for the support. If I could ask you to do one little thing, could you please rate this podcast on whichever podcast platform you listen on? That little action goes a lot further than you think and would really help the podcast grow. Thanks in advance. I really appreciate it. Back to the episode. Yeah, I agree. Because most of schooling is you learn something and there's an outcome, and your marks and grades are basically determined by someone else. And then in a normal job leaving university, it's a similar type of process where your promotion is dependent on someone else, and there's no autonomy taught, which I think creates fears because of that social conditioning. It's like, can I rely on myself? Like, how much do I charge? Like, all of those questions you don't know the answer to because you're never taught it growing up.
And then you add personality on top of that, who's like a confidence personality versus someone who's very uncertain about themselves and need a lot of affirmation. Like, poor kids growing up, hey? It's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And it must be fascinating working with these talented individuals who only lack resources to turn their ideas into reality. How rewarding have these projects been for you?
Actually, quite emotional. Yeah, because you see where you come from and what you've done, and you look at these guys growing up who's had nothing, and that tenacity, the endurance, still the zest for life and wanting to make something good and always seeing the silver lining. It's an eye opener. Yeah, again, I was there yesterday, so it's still sitting quite close to me at the moment. But there's two things actually that happens. The one is it makes me angry. When I see other people complaining and bitching and moaning about things where they have a really rich, fulfilled life. I'm not talking about money rich, and they actually just not using the opportunities that are coming their way. And then on the other side, it makes me so damn proud to be a part of this, to see how these people like just overcome these challenges. And I wish the whole world would have their tenacity and grit and endurance and passion. The world will be a better place if there's more of them.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective. My first job out of university, I spent quite a lot of time in the townships, and it really put things into perspective for me. Like, I'd go into some shacks where there'd be DJ equipment and there's a guy hustling, trying to make it as a DJ. And like, it just blew my mind that there are these little worlds where people are just trying to make an honest living and hustling. And it just put my life into perspective and made me really grateful for the opportunities I've had.
Yeah, and with some of these, what they call township entrepreneurs, they have enormous businesses. It's amazing to see. So, I mean, as they grow, and still just so, down to earth, and yeah, man, we just hustling and making things work, and it just warms my heart to see how they contribute back to their own community, and they feel that they have a purpose to contribute back, and at the same time, damn right benefiting from it. I love it. It's good to see. So yeah,
it is. And on top of all of these projects you're working on, you also wrote a book, which I really enjoyed. It's called Ditch Mediocrity: Learn How to Take Your Team Performance from Average to Incredible. What I loved about it was how to the point it was and how direct it was. I read the book I'm Okay, You're Okay by Thomas Harris, he breaks down transactional analysis and the PAC methodology, but it's extremely long-winded. I mean, it was written in 1967, so it's an exploration of all those ideas, and it took me a while to get through it. But you summarized many great theories and ideas and applied them all to business. What inspired you to write a book like this?
This is one of those things that I said earlier around I'm being pushed out of my comfort zone in the EOA community. My mentor kind of pushed me. He didn't tell me to do it, but he was like, you need to get this out. People need to understand what it is that you are doing with teams. And by no means, none of these models were made, like I didn't come up with these models. So I literally just looked at what is it that I enjoyed working with the most and what I see the biggest transformation in. But and again, Byron, it was so far out of my comfort zone. I don't write. I don't write well. In fact, I just said to my business partner when talking about social media content, I'm like, I go to the deepest, darkest space when I have to put my thoughts into writing. So it was a challenge, but it was something that I really enjoyed doing. And having worked with my mentor a lot in terms of things that I need to do in order to up my game, have business presence and all of those things, I also knew it was something that I had to do. So it was an interesting journey because I didn't think it's going to sell, but it's doing really well. So
I'm not surprised. It's an extremely valuable book. And like I said, I read about those ideas, and because of the long-winded nature of it, it was like a struggle to retain all the information. But I found like your concise chapters and diagrams make it, and applying it to business just made it so easy to understand and like helpful to retain.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
No problem. And could you explain what transactional analysis is and a bit about the PAC methodology? Yeah. I feel like it's applicable to everyone, not only in business, but in all contexts.
No, totally. So transactional analysis, or in short, TA, it's basically like a psychoanalysis theory, but it's, in simple terms, it's a type of psychology that focuses on relationships or that examines relationships and interactions. And that can also be an internal relationship and relationships with other people. And I've been working with it quite extensively since, I think it was 2009 already, where I did a deep dive into learning about TA and all the models inside of that. I know it's a model from the 1960s, and people say, but it's old material and it's old thinking. But it makes so much sense if you can understand the practicality of it. And I think to your point around the book, that's what I wanted to get through. I wanted to make sure that whoever reads this book knows what to do with the information. And that it's put in terms that I will understand, because I also need simplicity to get stuff, and it's just how my brain works. So that's kind of the bigger thing. It's how do people engage, how do they interact, and how do they build relationships or break them, if you want to call it that. So TA is the bigger theory around it, the methodology. And then inside of TA, you have different psychological models or tools. And the PAC model is one of them. We call it ego states. And the ego states is, you can refer to it as behavioral states that you are in. And it's the parent, the adult, and the child. And we all have all ego states within us. We all have parent, adult, and child within us, but you can break the parent and the child down into substates like critical parent and nurturing parent, and the child can go adaptive, rebellious, and free child. So I have all 6 ego states internally, and all 6 ego states are little voices in my head that speaks to me. So I can have my own interactions with myself and be very critical on myself, or being very nurturing towards myself. So you can imagine, you have conversations. But then we add complexity to it, because now, Byron, I'm speaking to you and you bring your 6 ego states. So now there's 12 ego states at play here. And that's kind of like the first thing to understand is why communication sometimes is so complex, because we are playing with these 6 ego states. And I don't always know where you're coming from, and you don't necessarily know where I'm coming from. But I think, and there's positives and negatives for each of these ego states. But I think the big thing to understand here is, and this is the bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people, it certainly was for me when I came across this the first time back then, is that you're actually responsible for the way people communicate back to you. Because if I come to you, if I speak to you from my parent ego state, my invitation to you is to respond from your child. And then I'm surprised when I get your child response. An example is, if I come to you and I say, seriously, Byron, it's ridiculous. How difficult is it to put an Excel report together? That's quite critical, right? And if you then come and like, oh, well, next time just do it yourself, and you walk away. And now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, how dare you speak to me like that? But I ain't sent you the invitation. All you did is you accepted. So we really are in charge of our own communication. And you're also responsible for the fact that you responded from your child. So now you invite me to come back again from my parent. And that then just goes and goes and goes a long way. Same if you come from a nurturing parent, where I can say, oh, shame, you didn't do this report well. It's fine. I'll do it next time. And then I hear leaders saying to me, my team or members in my team just can't do anything on their own. And when we unpack how they are being, it's like, okay, so when last did you allow them to do something on their own? Or did you give them feedback so that they can go back and redo what they're supposed to do? And I'm like, well, no, I just take it because then I do it better. No. So it's a fascinating theory. The PAC model is something that I use often in conflict, where people can start realizing how they are contributing and how they are adding fuel to a very heated conversation. And then the realization of how can they come from their adult, which is very factual, objective, and rather pull in the positive sides of the other different ego states. Because if you think about it, just critical parent brings structure, brings discipline. It has the ability to kind of set those boundaries and go, this is what is required. And it gives guidance. So rather, instead of being the negative critical parent, which is demeaning and walking over people and judging, is rather to go, hold on, we're going to deal with this, but let's find a way of how to do this well. And same with nurturing parent. Smothering someone, doing something for them all the time is the negative side, versus the ability to really understand and care and have compassion, but let them learn. So yeah, I can unpack this for a whole 2 days.
I think there's a very important point in there that you raised, was that we're in control and we have some control over how someone else reacts. And it's like a responsibility that we need to understand and bear. And when I first learned about it, that is something that really stuck with me. And I saw it sort of as an overlap with Stoicism, of the way you react is also on you, and what you say can influence other people who aren't aware of that. And so it's like a combination of like, you're fully in control of your own doing and your autonomy. And so like, you need to understand that and work with it in that way.
I think as you were speaking now, what also came to mind is it's hard to always be on control, because our emotions come into play. We have a bad day, and certainly I have many of those. My team makes me very aware of it. But with this, you can also go, hold on, I messed up. And then you tap into what we call the positive side of the adaptive child, which is the ability to go and say, I'm sorry. You know what? I was wrong. So it's not always having to have this pressure of, I need to be in control. I need to analyze every single thing. You can also use it to rectify something, and to have a tough conversation and to give feedback. So I just find it such a beautiful relationship communication understanding tool. And yeah, I remember the first time when I came across it, I had that model printed out on a piece of paper next to me. Every phone call that I made, every conversation that I had, I physically planned out, to the point now where it's quite in my head and I can easily do it. And under pressure, I sometimes forget.
Wow. And so there's so much actionable advice like packed into this book. How did you decide what to include in the book?
Yeah, that was a tough one. So I literally wrote down all my favorite tools that I've worked with over, at that time, I think it was 11 years of experience that I had. So I wrote down all the tools that I absolutely love using. But there was a lot. And I was like, I can't write a textbook. Also because of my own, like, I don't know if I can do this, the self-doubt.
Yeah.
And then I kind of process of elimination of the tools that I think are easiest to understand and easiest to implement without an external facilitator in the room. So that's how I narrowed it down. And then I looked at all the different tools and I said, does this make sense for leaders to actually follow this specific process with their teams? And will they get anywhere? So that's kind of, it wasn't a very scientific way of how I figured it out. It was more a gut feel and from my experience what worked really well. But the big thing for me, and I'm glad to hear that you say it's practical and that you actionable steps, that was my main outcome, is people must be able to read it and without them wondering what they now need to do with it, know exactly what the tool does and what it did for them, and then being able to do it with their teams. So yeah, that's kind of how I made up the topics.
Well, I think you succeeded. Like I said, it is very actionable and practical, and I find it very useful. Cool. And with all of these projects and businesses on the go, how do you find time to unwind?
So two things. I think the first thing is I'm extremely methodical about my calendar in terms of what happens when. It took me a very long time to get to that point where I'm so methodical about my calendar because I know I get overwhelmed if it's meeting. So I've kind of changed that completely. And that has released me from a lot of kind of pressure and guilt almost of not doing everything for everyone right now. So that's the one thing. And then about a year and a half ago, I think it was, or maybe 2 years ago, in fact, it's right here next to me. I got a piece of paper from my one goal. I can show it to you if you want. And what was on, and I was busy working, and I read it, and I just realized, shit, I need to change something. And that for me was the most radical. And so it was a mindset shift of, I want to make time. She was 6 at the time. So like, I'm going to miss her growing up. And don't get me wrong, I love my job. So I will get completely lost in it at their expense. And I mean, I'm going to show you. Let's just
show me.
See if I can move this around. So she gave me that, and it says, can you spend, and then there's a little space with the letter T, with me, love you. And she basically said to me, Mommy, I've got a riddle for you. Can you play a game? And I read it and was like, wow. So that kind of shifted my thinking. So now I make time and I love it. I sometimes, hence the freedom again, what we spoke about earlier. If it's a beautiful day in Noordhoek, and they get back from school, I'm like, screw it. Let's not do homework. Let's go and boogie board. So it really helps. And that gives me then time to really, when they see I need to focus, then I can focus, and I do it without guilt. So yeah, I don't know if that answers.
That's great. Yeah, it definitely does. I feel like work-life balance is so important, because burning out is also very unproductive. I mean, it doesn't help anyone if you've overworked yourself and then you've let your team down anyway because you've worked yourself to the bone. So there's definitely a necessity for balance.
So I'm gonna go against the word balance, if you don't mind.
Okay. Oh yes. So
please. I've got and maybe it's just my rebellious child. If we speak the pack model. It's my rebelliousness that comes out in terms of work-life balance. I refuse to use that word. I know it's semantics. You just change one word, but for me, it means something different. So balance for me means I have to have 50-50. So for me, it means everything needs to be in equal. And I don't want everything to be in equal. So that already puts a lot of pressure on me. So it's for us, we speak about work-life integration. Because sometimes I want to spend 70% of my time on the business because of the exciting things that are happening. And other times I want to spend 60% with my kids or my family or my friends, whatever the case might be. And I want to go on holiday, but at this point in time, I can't take a proper holiday because there's so many things on. So I'm like, okay, let me go on holiday and work 2 hours a day and still have an amazing time in the Kruger Park. Yes, there's time that we take for pure holiday and purely work focus. But for me, if I say I want work-life integration, it allows me to plan my day, my weeks as I want. Where work-life balance for me personally, it just puts a lot of pressure on me. So that helps for me quite a bit. And when we work with teams in terms of burnout and mental wellness and all of those things, and they say, but we want balance, then I challenge them too, because we don't live in a world of total balance anymore. Many, many years ago, it was totally just 85. Everyone was just that. It's not that anymore. So we kind of need to adapt, and balance, in my opinion, it's a tall order. And I don't want that balance. I don't want things to be equal.
That makes sense. Yeah. It is a semantic issue, but I think the words you tell yourself can mean different things, and maybe I should change my vocabulary, because I agree, if you want to work hard at something and you don't get tired from doing it, that could still be balance. If you need to unwind for an hour a day and you grinding for the rest of those hours, but it doesn't feel like it to you, just because the majority of people need longer to unwind or see your work from the outside as something stressful, it doesn't mean it's stressful to you, and it's like a case-to-case individual basis.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%.
With your experience with entrepreneurs, what one piece of advice would you give an aspiring entrepreneur wanting to run a successful business? It's quite a tough one.
Just one. Just one. I would probably say and it's just because it's the field that I'm in. So I'm biased in this one. But make sure that you focus on your culture from day one, even if you only have one team member. Get that so rock solid that even the first or the second team member is not going to dictate to you what they want you to do and how you should be. So think about the culture that you want. Think about how you want to build trust, how you want to have conversations in your business, how you want to get people to bring ideas. How do you want people to be in your business? And then make sure that you don't move away from that and start at day one. Again, we worked yesterday with some of the entrepreneurs, and they've been in business for 2 or 3 years, and they already have culture issues. Rather start it from the beginning. I had a scenario where, for example, I had an employee, because I was so desperate to hold on to my very first employee, that she was able to almost dictate the strategy and dictate things. And I just gave in, because it's like, oh, I need to hold on. I need to make you happy. So for me, it's kind of figure out, what do you want your business to look like, and how do you want people to be in that business? And then make sure that you nurture that. Yeah. That's one piece of advice.
That's great advice. So before we end, I usually hand over the mic and ask if you have a question for me.
Ooh, okay. I tell you what I'm going to do.
Okay.
So when we work with teams to build, there's different ways of building trust in teams. And I actually gave this tool for the guys yesterday in the Bootcamp to Boardroom session. Is I have a list of 89 questions, and I actually have it here because of the work that we've done. And we go through the room, and each person gets a different question that they have to answer. So I'm going to ask you to pick a number, and then you are going to get the question that is on my vulnerability-based trust question list. How's that?
That sounds great. I'll go with my favorite number, so number 9.
Number 9. Where's number 9? Oh, Byron. We'll ask another question after this, but have you ever broken someone's heart?
Not intentionally, but I think I did. When I was a lot younger, I feel like I wasn't as present and committed to the relationship, and when things ended, I didn't fight for it. So I think that all contributed to it. We didn't have a discussion about it to really confirm that. And it might just be my ego assuming I had more of an impact than I did. But that comes to mind. And so I feel like it's a possibility that was an instance where I did.
Any of that experience shaped how you deal with things today? Sorry, that's 2 questions.
Yes, it did. It shaped my experience today big time. It made me realize that I needed to be really committed and ready for another relationship. So it took me a while, because I realized that I need to work on myself. I need to be the right person that someone wants to be with. And that took a while. But yeah, I think also being a bit young and naive, I didn't realize how much of an impact I had on someone else's feelings. And so it just made me reflect on all of that. And I think it did change the way, I approach things.
Awesome. Thanks for answering the vulnerability-based question. That was a tough one. Just like, boom.
Well, thank you for asking it. That was a great question. I had 89 to choose from.
You had 89 to choose from, absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Heléne. I really enjoyed it. If people want to find out more about you and Credo Growth and any of your other projects, how can they do so?
I think the easiest probably on LinkedIn, Heléne Smuts. It's just, I think that you call it your handle, is Heléne Smuts. And then we have credogrowth.com as a website. And on there, you can actually sign up to our newsletter. The newsletter I am very proud of, because it's, again, very similar to the book. It's packed with tips and tricks and tools. It's not updates and selling or anything like that. It's really just adding value so that you can read the newsletter and go, oh, I can implement this. So feel free to add to the newsletter, and of course subscribe whenever you want to. But yeah, those two are the best places to follow us. And then we also have a Credo Growth LinkedIn page that has more up-to-date things. But I think maybe if it's useful for your audience, we having a event about 12 nuggets of sales in, I think it's the 29th of October. So it's a different business called Thrive In, where we have a sales community like EO and EOA, purely for sales managers. So that's something that people can definitely sign up for on the 29th. And yeah, you can just email me, Heléne@credogrowth.com. If you are interested, then we can send you some of the information. But it's a great talk, packed with 12 tips to improve sales. So yeah.
Fantastic. I'll put all the links to that in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me again, Heléne. I really, really appreciate it. And
I had fun. Thanks for talking to me. It was great.
Great. And chat soon.
Amazing. Thanks, Byron.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.